Hello, I'm LeBeau from LeBeau's Blog, and today we're asking the question, what the hell happened to Val Kilmer? You probably remember Val Kilmer from his most popular and successful roles. He became a big movie star with Top Gun, where he was Tom Cruise's rival. He was very memorable playing Jim Morrison in The Doors or Doc Holliday in Tombstone. He was, of course, a Batman. But then things kind of tapered off for Val Kilmer in the late 90s. We're going to take a look at what the hell happened. Val Kilmer's early career, he was a stage guy. He went to Juilliard. He took his craft very seriously. And then when he went to Hollywood and started making movies, he was cast in very light comedic roles, but he was a method actor. His first movie was Top Secret, which came from the guys who brought you Airplane. It's a spy spoof. There's a lot of visual gags and puns. It's all really silly. When they were making the movie, Zaz's team would get frustrated with Val because they would set up ridiculous sight gags and he would ask them a bunch of questions like, what's my motivation? Well, the motivation was they were trying to do a gag, but that wasn't how he worked. After Top Secret, he was in another small comedy that is kind of a cult classic today, Real Genius, where he played the rebellious college student who used his intelligence largely for mischief, which is kind of how Val Kilmer is. He was an immensely talented guy, but sometimes he would misapply those talents and use them to tweak people off. The director of Real Genius said of Val Kilmer that he was the best guy for the part, but not so easy to work with. He was intellectually challenging and erratic, not so surprising since that was the character. It was a big, demanding part, and he often avoided working and asked a lot of questions, and was sometimes late to the set and moody. He was almost in every scene for about 75 days, and I'm sure he was nervous. I liked actors with ideas, and he had many. Her take on things is pretty consistent with what a lot of directors have said about Val Kilmer. He has a lot of ideas. He asks a lot of questions. He can be moody. That's just how he is. Some directors really take to that, and others not so much. Of course, what really made Val Kilmer a big movie star was when he starred opposite Tom Cruise in Top Gun in 1986. Tom Cruise was the leading man. He was Maverick, kind of roles he was known for at the time. He was a rebel with dad issues. And Kilmer played Iceman, who was jockeying for position with Tom Cruise and Maverick. And some of that bled over into real life, because in real life, here were two guys who were both early in their career, both had a lot of potential, and were both kind of going for the same thing in different ways. Tom Cruise really wanted to be a movie star, and Val Kilmer didn't seem to have that as a goal. When Val Kilmer took a part or turned down a part, he was more interested in the challenges that specific project was going to bring. He wasn't so much concerned about building this resume that would get ticket buyers to come to his movies. He was concerned with, will this role challenge me? Rumors have swirled since Top Gun was made that Cruise and Kilmer didn't get along. They supposedly had a big fight. It turned physical, probably not the best thing for Val Kilmer, because he had started a feud with the guy who would be the biggest movie star in the world, arguably, for much of the next 2 decades. You gotta think that punch probably cost Val Kilmer some work. So Top Gun made Tom Cruise a star, and it helped establish Val Kilmer. People knew who he was, but he really didn't follow up on that. The next big movie that Val Kilmer appeared in was Ron Howard's Willow, which was a George Lucas produced fantasy film released in 1988, 2 full years after Top Gun. Val Kilmer played Madmartigan, which was kind of a cross between Aragorn from Lord of the Rings and Han Solo. It's a good, juicy part for him, but the movie wasn't a huge hit. It has its fans today, but it didn't turn into a franchise the way people would have hoped at the time. So this was a real missed opportunity. That could have been a part that he would have played repeatedly and helped fuel his career, but mostly, aside from some Willow fans out there, the movie kind of got forgotten. During the filming of Willow, Val Kilmer meets Joanne Whaley. The co-stars began dating in real life, and they were married right around the time Willow was released in theaters. They had 2 children together. They starred in the movie Kill Me Again, and then unfortunately, in 1996, their marriage ended in divorce. In the early 90s, Val Kilmer was still really trying to find something that would capitalize on the success of Top Gun. He hadn't really broken through. He had to really pursue the role of Jim Morrison in Oliver Stone's musical biopic, The Doors. He recorded his own audition and sent that to him. Eventually, he got the part, but he had to really go after it. Unfortunately, the movie wasn't that big of a hit. Then you've got some misses, some disappointments. Val Kilmer starred in Thunderheart, and the box office bomb The Real McCoy, which starred Kim Basinger. Things are starting to look pretty bad for Val Kilmer at this point. Everything he's touched since Top Gun has been a disappointment at best. That starts to turn around in 1993 when he plays Doc Holliday in Tombstone. At the time, there were actually 2 Wyatt Earp movies that were competing to get to the screens first. One starred Kevin Costner and was directed by Lawrence Kasdan. It was called simply Wyatt Earp, and that was viewed as the prestige picture. Tombstone starred Kurt Russell, and it was directed by the guy who made Rambo. Now, in the years since, Kurt Russell has come out and said that he actually directed the movie and that he hired George P. Cosmatos to ghost direct, as he had done for Sylvester Stallone in Rambo and Cobra. But the point that I'm making is no one looked for Tombstone to be a big movie. As it turns out, when Wyatt Earp came out, it was overly long, it was ponderous, it was frankly boring. Whereas Tombstone was a pretty good Western, and Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday just killed it. So if you like Tombstone, I'm guessing a lot of that has to do with Val Kilmer's very memorable performance as Doc Holliday. Val Kilmer followed that up. He had a cameo appearance playing kind of an Elvis type character in Tony Scott's True Romance. You get the impression he did that as a favor to Tony Scott, who directed him in Top Gun. Small part, but it was pretty cool, and it's indicative of some of the things that Val Kilmer was doing at the time. His next really big movie was Batman Forever in 1995. And if you're going to make an argument that Val Kilmer was ever an A-list actor, I think it's largely going to be based on the fact that he played Batman. Today, a lot of the guys who get cast as superheroes, they aren't necessarily big names. Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, these guys weren't necessarily big stars when they were cast in their superhero movies. But at the time that this was made, Michael Keaton was Batman, and Warner Brothers wasn't entirely certain that they could recast the part if Keaton walked away. But Keaton was asking for a lot of money. He wasn't especially interested in Joel Schumacher's lighter take on Batman. He's probably still a little bit mad that his friend Tim Burton had been let go. So Warner Brothers really had no chance of keeping Keaton on board, and I think they pretty much knew it. So they were looking for someone a little younger, maybe a little sexier, who could continue the Batman franchise, and Val Kilmer seemed like he might be able to do that. Unfortunately, Batman Forever, while financially successful, it was kind of a nightmare to make. There were a lot of feuds going on behind the scenes. Tommy Lee Jones didn't get along with Jim Carrey. Val Kilmer did not get along with Joel Schumacher. It was a pretty tense set. And when the time came to make another Batman movie, Joel Schumacher was more than happy to recast the role yet again. Kilmer had another obligation. He was going to make The Saint. Schumacher's another director who doesn't have the best things to say about Val Kilmer. He says he was being irrational and ballistic with the first AD, the cameraman, the costume people. He was badly behaved, rude, and inappropriate. We had 2 weeks where he did not speak to me, but it was bliss. 1995, good year for Val Kilmer overall. Kilmer also had a supporting role in Michael Mann's Heat. He got to work with Robert De Niro, but things are about to really drop off here. The next year, Val Kilmer appeared in The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is an infamous movie. A lot of things went wrong. Originally, Val Kilmer was cast in the leading role, but at the time, he was going through a divorce from Joanne Whaley, and he really just didn't want to do the movie anymore. So he wanted them to reduce the lead part by 40%. Well, they really couldn't just cut the lead, so they recast and put Kilmer into a supporting role. The guy who ended up making the movie was John Frankenheimer, who is also pretty notoriously difficult. He's very hard on actors. A lot of people have nightmare stories about working with John Frankenheimer. Reportedly, once he was done filming, Frankenheimer kicked Kilmer off the set. He did it with some colorful language, and he later told the press, there are two things I will never, ever do in my whole life. The first is that I will never climb Mount Everest. The second is I will never work with Val Kilmer ever again. In another interview, he said, I don't like Val Kilmer, I don't like his work ethic, and I don't want to be associated with him ever again. In the late 90s, he's making a lot of movies that aren't especially memorable. He did The Ghost in the Darkness with Michael Douglas, The Saint, which he passed up the opportunity to do Batman for. The Saint had a lot of potential. It was based on an old TV series starring Roger Moore, kind of a James Bond light. It allowed Val Kilmer to do a lot of disguises, which is something he really seemed to enjoy. It co-starred Elizabeth Shue. But the movie never really came together. It suffered from a lot of rewrites. The final product, well, not terrible. It's just kind of forgettable. And this was another movie that was supposed to be a franchise, but it just didn't work out. Val Kilmer also starred opposite Mira Sorvino in a romantic drama about a blind man. It was called At First Sight, and it was pretty limp. Kilmer is great as a blind man, and I'm a big fan of Mira Sorvino, but not a lot of reason to watch this movie. In the late 90s, Val Kilmer talks about having been offered a part in The Matrix. He would have played the Lawrence Fishburne part. I think probably most of us would agree that The Matrix turned out the way it was supposed to, and Lawrence Fishburne was great in the role. I'm not sure that Val Kilmer could have done any better, or that it really would have done all that much for his career if he had played Keanu Reeves' mentor. When he talks about why his career faltered, one of the things he mentions is that whereas Tom Cruise sought out these A-list directors, Val Kilmer turned down a lot of big-name guys. He turned down the chance to work with Ron Howard again after Willow. David Lynch approached Val Kilmer multiple times about starring in Dune and Blue Velvet, and he didn't really get those projects, so he turned them down. Val Kilmer has said that that's his biggest regret in his career, is that he turned down projects with talented directors that might have helped him establish himself. The 2000s were not a good time for Val Kilmer. By this point, his reputation was starting to catch up with him. He wasn't getting the best parts. He appeared in the science fiction movie Red Planet, where he supposedly feuded with Tom Sizemore. He was in The Salton Sea, which is generally looked at as a very good movie, but I don't think too many people have seen it. Then he starts appearing in direct-to-video movies like Hard Cash. And when this happens, you know an actor's career is in trouble. He starts doing a string of direct-to-video movies. There are some of his movies that made it into theaters. For example, the 2003 movie Wonderland looked like it might have been a comeback, but it just didn't quite gel. Then in 2004, Kilmer got to work with Oliver Stone again in the biopic Alexander, which starred Colin Farrell and Angelina Jolie. This looked like it could have been a very big movie. Unfortunately, it didn't do very well. It was supposed to make Colin Farrell a household name, and it ended up hurting his career. Val Kilmer put on a lot of weight for the part to play Colin Farrell's father, and he would struggle for years to take that weight off. Through the 2000s, you didn't see that much of Val Kilmer, but he was still working. In 2006, he starred opposite Robert Downey Jr. in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is a really fun buddy detective movie. He worked with Tony Scott again Then in 2009, Val Kilmer appears opposite Nicolas Cage in The Bad Lieutenant, which is another movie critics really liked, but not a lot of people saw. By 2010, Val Kilmer's playing the bad guy in the Saturday Night Live movie MacGruber. He's not getting the best projects anymore. He's still working, but most of the stuff he's doing is off of people's radar. Eventually, Kilmer takes up his passion project, which was playing Mark Twain in a stage production called Citizen Twain. And Kilmer spent most of his time and effort since 2010 putting together this project. You'll see him pop up in some other things. He did some voice work in the Disney movie Planes. He showed up in the 2014 miniseries, The Spoils of Babylon, but most of his time and effort has gone into raising money for Citizen Twain and then touring with that. So by this point, Val Kilmer's days as a movie star are solidly in the past. His career is not over, he's still working, but in 2015 he's diagnosed with throat cancer, and he's spent the last several years dealing with that. Initially, he denied reports, but in 2017, he finally admitted that he had had a procedure on his trachea. It left his voice reduced to basically a rasp, which obviously is going to impact how much work he can get as an actor. He'll be appearing in the upcoming Top Gun sequel, but I wouldn't expect him to have a very large role given his current health problems. But anyway, that's what happened to Val Kilmer. Despite having immense talent and having all the ingredients to be a major movie star, he just never found the right projects, and he got a reputation for being difficult. There's a story from the set of Tombstone where Kevin Jarre, who was originally hired to direct the movie, Jarre told a story about having a conversation with Kilmer, and they were deep in conversation. He says when a stand-in picked up this big bug, a locust, and brought it over to them and held it up, and Jarre says, "Oh, hey, that's pretty cool." But Kilmer doesn't even look at the guy, reaches out, grabs the bug, pops it in his mouth, and eats it. According to Jarre, this was a rather large locust. Not looking at the stand-in, Kilmer says to Jarre, "As you know, I have a reputation for being difficult, but only with stupid people." And I think that kind of sums up Val Kilmer's attitude. He knows that he can be abrasive. And if you've ever seen interviews with him, he expresses himself in some unusual ways, which apparently on the set could be misinterpreted, or maybe he was just kind of a jerk. That's certainly how some people took it. You'll find people out there who will defend Val Kilmer's behavior, and you'll also find plenty that won't. Hollywood will put up with that kind of behavior. If you sell tickets like Tom Cruise, they will brush your odd behavior right under the rug. But when your movies aren't performing, and outside of Batman, most of the movies that starred Val Kilmer did not do very well, that'll eventually catch up with you. And that's what the hell happened to Val Kilmer. Hope you've enjoyed this look at Val Kilmer's career. And obviously, we wish Val Kilmer